Welcome. I'm at retirement age, and this is the very first time I've actually hosted a webinar. I don't know about you, Rob.
Yeah, first time I've hosted one equally.
Yeah, so there we go. So I'm going to try and be really clever now and go to the share screen, which should work first time if we're really lucky. And as said, I'm the chair of the Cheshire and North Wales Dyslexic Association for a long time. And hopefully I can use some of those skills and some of those experiences. My session this evening is really important. This is not a training course this evening. This is not stuff you can write to say Clive Armitage said this from Cheshire. Most of it is my feelings, the things I've discovered, the experiences I've had with both myself, my own children, and all the families that we've worked with. The first slide, I don't know if you'll be able to see it all because of where we are with the whereabouts you've actually got your screen, but there is nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. Now, we all know that, but what some of you may not know is some caterpillars are incredibly clever and they find the way to an ant's nest. And when they get to the ant's nest, they pretend to be a queen ant. So all the other ants look after them. Now, the analogy is that's what I want to do to our children. They may not fit into the school. They may be that caterpillar waiting to be a butterfly. But if we get it right and all the other little ants around them can help them and look after them, that is the scenario I want to create for our children. And it's not cheating. It's using all the resources available. Literally 30 seconds about myself. I will be using some humour in this session. That's not that we ever underestimate how serious and how difficult things can be. We've got to laugh at ourselves occasionally, and we've got to laugh at each other. Laughter helps, it really does. I was politely asked to leave school when I was 15. Both parties agreed it would be better. I bumbled around, had a successful engineering career because a lot of dyslexics make good engineers, and discovered I had this funny thing called dyslexia when I was 30. Got into university without a single qualification when I was 31, and then nothing surprised me more. I ended up teaching in a further education college for the next 25 years. Having said that, I still can't read and write very well. That's why you're not going to get a large PowerPoint off me tonight, because it would just give you far too much complications trying to work the spellings out. Okay. The next slide is fairly self-explanatory. Imagine it's a child in the classroom or even the position. A piece of information is given. You've got 6 people who can possibly hear it differently. You've got 6 people who will possibly pass that information on differently. And you've got 6 people who may have a different idea of what was asked of them. As children, at children's parties, we used to play something called Chinese whispers. I'm sure we've all done it. And the message that's sent out at the beginning is never the same 10 people later. That's what's happening to our children every day. The message, the information that's being given, when it goes around the dyslexic mind, it goes around their brain, these bits get muddled up and these bits come out differently. So that's just to give you an idea of the situation, what's happening. So it's about inspiring our children and it's about measuring the results. And it's hard. A little story. There's a farmer, a successful farmer, and he's walking through his field. And he's looking at the crop, he's picking up the seeds, and there's a little bird, and this little bird's flat on its back, and it's looking up to the sky. It's perfectly well. Now, what might surprise you, this little bird can talk. It's unusual, but it does happen, especially in Crewe, Cheshire. So the farmer said, "Are you okay?" And the little bird said, "Yes, I'm fine, but I've just heard that the sky's going to fall in." The farmer replied, "The sky's going to fall in?" And the little bird said, "Yes, so I'm prepared. I'm going to hold it up." The farmer replied, looking a little bit puzzled, "You won't be able to do anything with those scrawny little legs." The bird replied, "Yes, but I'm going to do my best." And I think that's really, really important. And your children sometimes will be doing their best, but sadly, it's difficult to see. Any parent, the most valuable thing you can give your children is time. That's really important. Time is valuable. It's difficult. It's at the end of the day more often. You may have siblings to be containing with. And with my beautiful partner, who has a couple of dyslexics to live with, she's got me to live with. And I'm only a man. So she's got to undo all the dyslexics I've made for the day. She's to interrogate me for the things I forgot to tell her. And she's got to try and help me and help the children. It's exhausting. What you mustn't forget, because your children are exhausted and they might not look it, we'll talk about how hard they've been working at school a little bit later on, but they're also giving you their time. There's two lots of time here, and it's really, really important. And my son, my youngest son, he knows I'm going to talk about him tonight. He's no better now, but Aaron can only cope with 3 pieces of information or 3 instructions. If you give him any more, he will struggle. If you give him any less, it's fine, but then he keeps coming back for the next ones. So let's just say he's been in the garden and he's absolutely full of mud. He's been playing, that's fine. You shout out to the door like most parents, come in, it's tea time. That's instruction number 1. He can manage that. Then I give him instruction number 2. Shoes on the step, clothes in the laundry, have a bath. I've broken the rule. He's got 4 pieces of information and he can't keep 4 in his mind. So 1 has to go. Now, luckily, he's mastered this. He knows he's already got to the door. So the one that can go is, come in, it's tea time. He thinks he's cracked this. Sadly, the others have got mixed up. So I do find him in the bath, but his shoes are in the washing machine and his clothes are on the back doorstep. It would be very easy to go up and not tell him off, but to say, for goodness sake, why have you put your shoes in the washing machine? That is where it's quite easy to be cruel as a parent without realising it, because he's then looking and racking his mind. And I can see it, he's a lot older now. He has done exactly what his dyslexic mind told him to do. And he's absolutely confident he's done it right. But he hasn't. So he's actually been told off for doing something he thinks he's done right. That is one of the difficulties. So learn the way to communicate with your children. Learn the way, whether it's lists, whether it's giving information in smaller pieces, whether it's colour coding, whether it's cue cards, simple things. In all Aaron's shoes that we're going to school in had blue insoles. As simple as that. Shoes that were for outside didn't have anything in. Didn't want to confuse it, but his 2 pairs of good school shoes we only wanted to use for school had blue inside them. He could manage that. It was a little thing that helped him. More often than not, it's the simple things that can make a massive difference. Celebrate success with them, but don't patronise. They'll see through you. They're not daft. If you're gushing every time they manage a simple thing, they're going to realise that, well, I don't really have to do much and I'm going to be the best person in the world. Support weaknesses, and the hardest thing for a lot of parents is accept these things they'll never do. I will never, ever spell. I'll never spell. It won't happen. Therefore, with technology now, there's lots and lots of different ways. But what I couldn't do at school, and my children did, 2 are dyslexic, they would ask their friend or ask their teacher. I was always far too embarrassed to do that. And I couldn't do it because I went to school in the thick, stupid, you can't do it era. So empower them, talk to them, reassure them, get them buddied up with a really good friend. And if that doesn't help, just work with them that they're different. It's hard. Friendship groups are hard at school. The friendship groups my son had were a completely different cup of tea to the friendship groups my daughter had. But those can be used, especially with social media. Get to know the parents. If your child comes home without the information they need, or they've forgotten it, or they've left their bag at school, don't shout at them for leaving the bag at school. Something else has been on their mind, they're dyslexic. Don't send them back for it. Use your support group. So easy now. Get onto one of your friends, your neighbours who's in the same class, get them to take a photograph of the homework or what it was and send it across. Again, simple things can make all the difference. It's really, really important. My son could come home okay, be ready to sit down, start his homework, go to the toilet and come back, and that was it. It had gone. It hadn't gone because he got fed up. That little bit had moved on. What worked for him, if I sent him to run around the garden 3 times, literally, and on a hot day like this, I'd have the hose pipe behind him, which would make him run faster, but he'd enjoy. He would come in then. So a far better thing is to have 2 or 3 good 10-minute sessions than a really dragged out 1 hour. It's just not going to work. When we sit down with our dyslexic children, some of them, picture the scene. Those of you who used to go to the library or still do, and the old-fashioned library used to have a card index to find books. Modern libraries have a computer. Every time your child looks for a word, it's like you go into the library and you look at that card file. It's taking longer already. Then you find the book, you find a subject area, you find a shelf number, you find a book number. So your child is still looking, their library is their brain. You walk down the library, you find the shelf, you run your finger along, and the librarian, just by accident, has put it on one shelf above. It's so close, but you'll never find that book. This is what's happening to your children all the time. Yes, they know the information. Yes, they know it's somewhere in the mind. They just can't find it. So if you've not got a pen and paper, my good friends, don't panic. If you have, I'm going to make you dyslexic just for a minute or 2. Don't worry, there is a cure for this one, not for the real dyslexia. But if you've got a pen and paper handy, I'm going to try and simulate a situation that will show you the amount of time and effort it puts your child into finding something that they know. So, if you have pen and paper to hand, I live in Crewe, Cheshire. It's a railway town. Every single town in Crewe, Cheshire, every single road sign has a symbol on it which tells people the way to the railway station. Now, it's a symbol, it's on the sign. I'd like you to do 1 or 2 things. 1, don't Google this, it's not the pub quiz, you're not allowed. Think, can you see that sign in your mind? 2nd, think, if I saw it on a road sign, I'd definitely know what it meant. And 3rd, I'd like you to draw the sign on a piece of paper. Now, if the good people who are managing this meeting can take some votes in, because in a moment, I'm just going to ask people to acknowledge, I think it's a thumbs up or something you do, the number of people who think they have absolutely got that right. Is that possible, Claudia? Or Nikki, sorry?
They could raise their hand, yeah.
So if they could raise their hand, please, that you've drawn the official, it's only been there for 85 years, so don't worry about it. The official sign that used to be on all the British Railway trains, it's on every single station, on every roadside. So if you could raise your hand, please, that you definitely know it. And Nikki, can you give me a feedback on that number? Does it work that way?
There's not many, to be honest.
Not many, right? That's okay. That's good. There's not many. So now I'm going to show it you, and then there's a couple more questions. Now, I'd like Nikki, if people could put their hands up if they instantly recognise it and are wondering why they didn't see it in their mind. Is that a sensible question? Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? Do you know what it means now? That's the question.
Yeah, nearly everybody has got their hand up now.
Everybody knows now.
Yeah.
So two things I'd like to talk about this sign. One is, this is how we process information. If all the parents and guardians and carers can think now of the 10, 15 seconds they racked their brain to find that, if they had to do that for every single word when they were writing a document or a story at school, it's not fun. It's going to be quite boring. The second is I'm going to tell you a coping strategy, a simple one, and I guarantee virtually nobody on this webinar tonight will forget. There are two lines going across. They are the railway lines. The top line has an arrow pointing from left to right. Rob, is that right? Because I get left and right mixed up. So the arrow is pointing to the right-hand side, and the British Rail motto is, we will take you there, the arrow pointing one way, and we will bring you back, the arrow pointing the other way. That now has made that piece of information a lot bigger. I guarantee in a week, in 2 weeks, or forever, you will remember that. And that is a simple coping strategy for quite a few dyslexic things. If you can make it bigger, or you can wrap a story around it, it makes it better. Sometimes you'll be completely frustrated. My child can't even write the smallest word in the world. If you've lost a penny in the bottom of your handbag, it's a lot harder to find. That's my handbag as well, or wallet. It's a lot harder to find than the £20 note, and you look after the £20 note a lot more. So we look after and we put the big things in a safer place. The little things sometimes get lost. And this is what some of our children are doing. They're losing it, they can't find it. So when you sat with them, if they can't find something, encourage them to find it, but don't make it a battle. Celebrate the success. Don't do it for them. It's too easy. As a lecturer, I used to more and more towards my retirement have to write on students' feedback forms, I wish you could produce the same type of work in the classroom as you produce at home. That was a very polite way of saying somebody else has done this for you and it's not helping. Okay? Reading should be fun. Learning should be fun. All children want to learn. I absolutely point blank refuse they don't want to learn. But when it becomes embarrassing, when it becomes difficult, it is absolutely easier. And for my case, when I was at school, it was easier to be thrown out of the class, thrown out of the school, even punished, than to be humiliated. Right, if you've still got your pen and paper handy, I would like you, we don't do this very often now. We don't write checks. We don't write letters by hand, but could you just write, my friends, your normal everyday signature? Just your normal signature as you would without thinking about it on any document. Okay, some of you may have guessed what's coming. I would like you now to put the pen in your other hand, and I would like you to produce an identical signature that will get past the bank cashier. And Nikki, if we can have a hand raise on this, please, I would be grateful. Give them a while, they're not going to be quick.
Okay. So are they putting their hand up if they think they can?
If it's identical, yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we barely got any.
So again, picture the scenario. It's the same as the railway sign. If your child is putting that effort into every single word they write, because the hand they normally write with, a pen does not fit in a dyslexic child's hand. It's not comfortable. Some can be coped with holders. A couple of European countries are experimenting with scrapping joined up writing because they've decided that the generation of children now will only ever use a keyboard. So why teach them? Why put that time into joined up writing when they use a keyboard? I don't know what the results are going to be, but if you can picture in your mind your child having to put that amount of concentration, I would guess Your arm wasn't moving correctly. I would guess you were either pressing too hard or too light. I would guess that you were telling the pen to go one way and it went another way. And that is another good example. And it's not easy, but how you can think of what's happening to your child. Tell them to forget the spellings at school. If they can't do them, we'll talk about finding a way around it shortly. But this coping strategies, tell them that not everybody's going to get in the school football team. Not everybody's going to get in the school play, and not everybody's going to be able to be who they are. Yes, we can talk about very famous people. Richard Branson springs to mind. He doesn't have to do anything now because he's got other people to do it for him. But he dodged and ducked and dived as a young entrepreneur, and he's made his money. Okay. This writing business, pens, pencils and whatnot, overrated if you ask me. It is, but everything we still do, everything we're still checked on, ultimately boils down to reading and writing somewhere. Not always, but a lot of the time. So and it's my friend is Eeyore, because Eeyore's very, very sad. And if you read the stories, all the other people look after him and always try and make him happy. So Eeyore needs lots of help, and lots of other people do. Okay, little story. It's a true story. My daughter, when she was at school, was a bit of, we used to call her Tilly Flop because she'd trip over a chalk line on the floor or over a shadow. She was very mildly dyslexic, and she got through. She went down the middle and kept under the radar. She was a very popular girl, didn't go out of her way. She got a little bit of extra time, but she was a dolly daydream. And at the end of her school career, she had an excellent relationship with one of the teachers. And that teacher wrote on her school report, Katie, unless you stop staring through the window, you will not ever get a good job. And it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it was true. She was spending a lot of time not focusing on the task in hand. My daughter is now a train driver. As a train driver, some of you are probably already laughing. What does she spend all day doing? She stares through the window. And that is a true story. She earns more money than I've ever earned, and she loves it, and the responsibility, and her employer support her. Yes, I know Virgin have been and gone. I have used this presentation before, and there was obviously a link to Richard Branson, but I've reused it anyway. When you sat with your children, you're not going to be able to do everything, sorry. Just be honest with them. Just say, sorry, I can't do that. I'm going to have to find the answer. Let's discover it together, or let's do something we can do. Never, ever punish yourselves. Mums and dads, carers, you have big sticks. Put the big stick away. You haven't done anything wrong, and they haven't done anything wrong. If they're dyslexic, that's the deal they got. Another little story, but it represents me. This is about me. When I don't know if they still do it now, but when I was at junior and primary school, we used to have something called a news book, and we would write something about the weekend. I used to share a bedroom with my older brother. And this scenario is what would be in our news book. My brother would write, we awoke at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning when Dad came in to get us ready. The sun was shining when I drew back the curtains. I opened the windows, looked outside. I could hear the birds singing. It's going to be a beautiful day. That's what John would write. Now, I had exactly the same experience, but I would get my news book out and I would write, got up, it was nice. I've said the same story. I've said the same thing. I would want to write what was before. I would want to tell the story. But my event of things, version of events, is right, but it doesn't reflect you as a person. And this is another good example. On the selection, for a first selection, everybody has to take the same exam. It's a very old picture, this. Please climb the tree. So we have a bird that doesn't have to climb, with a monkey who'll be up there in a second, the penguin, the elephant, the goldfish, the seal, and the dog might make it and not get back down. So it's not fair. And employers are starting to realise that, and good schools are starting to realise that. But for a teacher, it's really, really hard. You can have 5, 6 children in the same classroom with different needs, without the correct learning support, without the correct resources even, sadly, and you've got to do your best with it. And it's not easy, I can assure you. Right, we've just time for one last case study, and then I'll pass you over to Rob. Rob's going to be with you about 20 minutes, and then we're going to have time for 10 minutes or so questions afterwards, which I hope there's some. When I used to have to do a talk at school all those years ago, I used to pray that nobody asked questions because it made the talk longer. That is definitely not the case now, my friends. My son, when he was 10 years old, the government insisted he brought 20 spellings home every Friday night, and he had to learn them for Monday. It was impossible. He's severely dyslexic. He had a good teacher, and he apologised. He said, "I can't get around this, Clive. It's the law." It was a nightmare. He used to go in on the Monday. He would get 2 or 3 right. I understand the teacher could not collect them all in. They used to use the child on the next seat to mark them, and Aaron and another child both felt really, really bad. Mr. Challoner, I thank you. I hope you're listening to this. Got sick to death of this, so he told me he had a new system. And the other children were told, and this is important, there's no secret, Aaron and the other child got 4 spellings. The rest got 20. Aaron learnt them. He may get 2 or 3 right. I hasten to add he'd forgot them by Wednesday, and he still would now. The teacher let them all do the spellings. He then said, "You're in the last year at infant school now, junior school. You're old enough to take some responsibility and mark your own paper. So you're going to mark it yourself." And he put all the spellings up on the overhead projector. The children marked them. He said, "I'm not going to collect the marks now because you're old enough to do some maths." And he got all the children to convert their answers into a percentage. Aaron's life changed that day because he suddenly started getting 50 or 75% out of 100%. The other children knew they weren't bothered. They didn't care. So that simple thing, it allowed the teacher to tick his boxes. It allowed Aaron to feel better. And it was done just by flexing the rules. Not cheating, it was a complete game changer. Just going to put this in very, very quickly. I know I'd said I'd finish. I'm going to steal a minute off you, Rob. Is that okay? This is the funnel effect. The middle funnel shows a child in a classroom that's doing okay. The water is running down and a small amount is being missed. The child is taking the rest of the information in. It's going into the part of the brain it needs to, and it's being absorbed. It's going in. And the one on the left, as you can see, there's a little bit more being lost, but there's still a lot going into the container. The dyslexic mind works differently. It's a very small receiver because, in my case and my son's case, if I'm listening, I cannot write under any circumstances. I can't take notes. If I put my head down to take notes, my hearing automatically switches off. So I'm only getting 1/3 of the information, hence the small test tube. If I've got a big test tube or a big funnel, that's fine on the left. But if the information is still coming too fast, a lot of it is going to flow over the top. So thank you for listening to me. I hope that's been a start. We have scratched the surface. Rob, at the end of our talk, and you will get this sent to you afterwards, will give the contact details for the Cheshire and North Wales Dyslexia Association. We welcome you to contact us. If there's a rush, it will take me a while to get through. I will answer every single email. I've been the helpline advisor for 25 years, and I'm incredibly patient, and I'm going to finish on this point. I'm so patient, I'm still waiting for my first pay slip. and it's not arrived yet. So fingers crossed. I hope that's been okay. I'm going to mute now and pass you over to my long-standing friend and colleague, Rob.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Clive, for that contribution. Lots of very fascinating stories and anecdotes and experiences, and some advice thrown in as well. Thanks very much to Claudia and Nikki for hosting us tonight. So I've got 19 minutes now because Clive stole a minute. So let's get straight away. So my name's Rob Pickersgill, and I work in partnership with the Cheshire and North Wales Dyslexia Association with Clive. We've worked together in education for 25 years, but it's only the last couple of years that I've started focusing specifically with clients with dyslexia and other neurodiverse conditions and other disabilities. And so a lot of what I'm going to tell you is very much squeezed into those last kind of couple of years. I've got some slides to show you to kind of support you, and they'll be available. Claudia and Nikki will be sending those out to people, so don't worry if you miss anything, and please do give us some questions as you think of them. Please do add them to the chat tonight. So let me just set up my slides. Not the last one. Let's just go back. Apologies. Okay, so following on from what Clive's talked about, Clive's talked a lot about young people and what you can do as parents, carers, teachers, professionals to help young people. I'm going to focus more on what they can perhaps look forward to over the next few years, and why they should look forward with hope, and why you should realise there is an awful lot of support and potential out there going forward to help your young people, whether it's your child or the people you're supporting and working with. A little bit tense tonight because I know one of my clients, Sarah there, who put a quote up very kindly. She sent that in today, and I know she's listening online. So thank you very much for your support and your testimonial there, Sarah, who has been one of my clients recently. So who am I? I work with, as I say, Clive with the Cheshire and North Wales Dyslexia Association, and on the back of that, in the last 12 months in particular, we actually, with myself and Clive, identified that there was a real need to advocate for people who are coming to us, or either being referred to us through the association, or people who found us quite often in desperation, and were very much struggling at the time. We realised there was a real need to kind of pull together professionals, assessors, people who could provide assessments in Cheshire and Staffordshire, along with tutors and other support services that might be required for people who were coming to us. So on the back of that, I started to kind of funnel my ideas together, and hence real life learning was developed, and we're now at the point where I have a team of 6 people working with me to provide different types of support, training, and assessments for clients. So what I'm going to brush on very, very briefly tonight is how we advocate and begin to help people that come to us from through all different avenues, whether it's on social media or through the web page, quite often through the Facebook page. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why young people and yourselves can be optimistic about the future in terms of support and funding that's available. And I've got some case studies to share with you. I've changed the names, but they're some case studies I think you'll find very interesting, and hopefully you'll be inspired by some of the outcomes that we've been able to that I've been able to share with you tonight. So how do we begin to advocate? So quite often Clive and I will receive referrals that are from people who've struggled for years at work, sometimes in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. I've had clients this year come to us. Quite often employers aren't aware of what kind of needs or adjustments are required. Very often that's because people don't want to share that information with employers. They feel awkward, embarrassed. They don't want to share their condition. They're not at that point of sharing information, and they're still struggling with embarrassment and wrestling with the fact that they might need help. So it can take it. They can quite often clients, as you yourselves, if you work with young people or adults with dyslexia or other neurodiverse conditions, will recognise this stress and this huge turmoil in parents and young people with dyslexia before they're able to start to get the support that they require. And often it's quite a significant change at work or in someone's personal life that will cause them to reach out and come to us. So we start very gently in terms of the phone conversations. People don't seem to want to Zoom anymore now after last year. I think we've had enough of that. So there's very few that kind of thing. So it's either face to face, but initially often quite a few phone calls discussing people's needs and supports. Quite often discussing the massive issues they might be facing at work in terms of very often bullying, mental health, time off ill, extended time off leave off from work. And where necessary, where clients ask us to, we will liaise with employers and discuss the potential to go in and do dyslexia awareness training for other staff, as well as the individual support, the one-to-one support with the client, with the individual. We'll also do an awful lot of advocacy. One of my biggest learning curve this year has just been how much effort people require and support from us before they ever necessarily become clients. They come to us for support, and we provide that voluntary support at first contact, where we support them and we can signpost people. But if they want further support and the funding that might be available, that I'm going to come to shortly, there's an awful lot sometimes for clients loads of barriers, frankly, in terms of accessing, form filling, what can I do, what am I entitled to, and all the barriers that go with bureaucracy that frankly, if you're dyslexic or you don't have someone helping you, can just mean you just walk away, actually, and clients will have expressed that to me. So we'll help them with applications for funding for things like disabled students allowance, and as well as access to work funding through the DFE, for the Department of Work and Pensions, DWP, and then we'll go in and help have conversations with that individual about how they might be able to discuss reasonable adjustments with their employers, as well as the other support that they might need going forward. So for your young people, if you are working with young people, if you're a teacher or someone supporting, if you're a parent supporting a young person, if you're going off to university or you're thinking of studying and continuing beyond school, there is funding available to get loads of extra support, one-to-one support. It will pay for tuition, one-to-one, probably on a weekly basis. And one of my clients last year who was getting DSA, she had, I think it was up to 34 sessions, one-to-one sessions paid for a year to have that extra tuition, as well as all the technology, things like laptop, things like Dragon, as well as the training and the software. So it's an awful lot of support available. If you're a young person, or you've got someone that you're supporting who's working or an apprenticeship, who's 16 or above, or wants to go into their own business, there are vast amounts of support and funding through Access to Work, through the Department of Work and Pensions, up to I don't address your volume, up to £62,000 per year per client, if you have, depending on your disability. Not necessarily for everyone with dyslexia, but I'm going to give you some case studies in a moment, and that will become apparent to you just how much support and funding there is available through this scheme. But again, there are barriers there. If you are self-employed, or you've got a client or someone who's dyslexic or has a disability, and they want the funding, they can get it, but they've got to do a business plan first. So again, so much of my learning from back about January this year was that actually we can get funding for clients who are thinking of setting up their own business or who've already got it, but they're going to need some kind of business plan. Again, how does a dyslexic person who's never done a business plan do a business plan? And that was exactly what one of my clients earlier this year, that was the message he sent to me. He'd had the letter from Access to Work, and that was a point at which I realised there was going to be more support and effort required to help them just get to the point where they need that where they get that funding through. So an awful lot of our effort and energy, emotional energy, listening, talking to clients, hearing their frustrations, because this all takes time, but nevertheless we get there eventually. But this can take 2 or 3 months of upfront effort. In terms of recent clients, I've got loads of stories to tell you, and I'm not going to have time to tell you all of them because Clive's still my minute. But I've got clients from landscape gardeners. I've got a neuro psychologist, doctor of neuropsychology, who's reached out, knows everything about dyslexia, but nevertheless has managed to reach out and reach out for support. Quite often clients will have other conditions, not just dyslexia, which can complicate things, and they may not know themselves if they've not been diagnosed. But essentially we work towards helping clients feel empowered, so we build them. So quite often we pick them up off the floor. Is that fair to say, Clive? You can just nod. In terms of where they often start, and when they come to us, they're very often extremely distressed. Before we can start to build that confidence and help them start to feel empowered about the options available to them. So I wanted to share with you some case studies. Again, I'm not going to have time to do them all, but I've known Jake for a couple of years. Suffers from dyslexia and really struggles with his self-esteem. When I first met him 2 years ago, his whole day was a stressful nightmare of trying to hide his condition, terrified of being found out by other people, and spent huge amounts of energy hiding and anticipating where he might get found out every day of his life, he wasn't ready to share that. Applied for Access to Work funding, got coping strategy training, one-to-one coaching. So we met over a period of several weeks initially, and then I left him to it. And then last year we reached out and got back in touch again and started doing, had another application, and he gets up to 5 hours a week now of one-to-one support to help him he's with a large utility company, so there's loads of online courses he'd never been able to access for the last 2 or 3 years. So he now gets that as well as the software. They even helped pay for a printer and a laptop, as well as dyslexia awareness training for his management and his team, who certainly lack empathy, for just to put it mildly, in terms of the kind of environment that he was working in. And quite quickly, he passed his driver trailer test, and this year he's done loads of online courses at work that he could never have done. And now he's actually happy to kind of talk about this, the fact that he's dyslexic, and actually kind of have that conversation and be something of an ambassador with his organisation. For those of you, if you're working with people or young people who are thinking, well, yeah, but I don't want to go into my own sort of business. I don't want to work for someone else. I want to be my own Branson. Again, there's lots of funding there. Mark, one of my clients who's become a good friend this year, has his own business in landscape gardening, has up to 8 hours a week of admin and account support now, and some of that is for social media as well. He's had some coping strategy training that was funded. Because he is so laid back and he works for himself, after 2 sessions, I just said, you need to go away because you just don't need me, because his attitude was much more laid back and he did not get stressed about things he couldn't do. That said, in terms of what's happened, what's the difference? He's being paid now for work that he did a year ago, because the people we got in to support him have been able to set him up with a software called Xero. He can actually do his accounts, he can actually send invoices out and make sure that you should check when they've arrived. So in terms of him and what's happened to him, it's made a huge difference for his own business and for the people that work for him. And he's also passed his electrician's license, which is a whole new aspect of his business that he's benefiting from. I know I'm running short on time, so I'm going to say, use this as the last one. Abby really struggled, came to me 2 or 3 months ago, really struggling. Had already had a breakdown a couple of years ago because of the pressures and the bullying from overt bullying from a previous manager in the NHS. But when I met her, has been in a new role for about 8 months now. Again, we've only done a few sessions, but her whole approach, the fact that she is an expert in neuropsychology and yet still is reaching out, I think it's a good lesson for all of us who are kind of perhaps worried about revealing ourselves. And it's great that she was able to kind of engage in. We've got a couple more sessions to go, but she's engaging. She's off on her holidays at the moment, but she's got as a role model and somebody who's worked extremely hard to get into that career. She is at times in the past thought about dropping out completely despite spending 15 years invested in that career. So it's great to see her pursuing her ambitions. There is some more on here that I'm not going to have time to read through. There's a story I found just today, actually, on one of the Facebook support pages for dyslexia, which I think is quite relevant. But I'll leave you to read that afterwards. If you want to chat with me, if you want to have got any questions about what we do at Real Life Learning here in South Cheshire, feel free to give me a call or drop me an email, and we'll help you in any way we can. Can I pass you back to Clive? You want to add anything at the end there?
Perfect timing. Folks, you can either screenshot that or you will get this sent to you later. Now, one or two of you might be saying, I thought this was about working with young people at home. It is. But I'm really, really happy Rob could join us tonight, because there is a conversation. Some of you will be saying this is the wrong way round. I don't think it's the wrong way round. I think there's a bit missing. What Rob does, and that money should be there, and believe me, always will be there. The government cannot take this money away from people with disabilities. Yes, there should be money now. This is what I want you to know about what your children can work to, because it's about the future. It's about doing the best now, dealing with a bad deal, and it is, but dealing with that, working to the future. You're not going to talk to a 10-year-old about disabled students' allowance or access to work. But if you know this is there later, you know that you can do your best with them and get them to the best that they can achieve, and that's what we want. I never wanted my children to become something they couldn't be. I wanted them to achieve the best they could, reach the full potential, and be happy going to school and happy going to work. And I feel privileged that all three are. So thanks for that, Rob. I'm going to pass you back to the host now. We've actually finished bang on time, which is amazing. I don't think we've a zillion questions, but that doesn't matter. So if we can pick up with the host, that's fantastic.
Thank you so much, Clive, Rob. That was awesome. We've had a lot of thank yous and great information. So I'll start with the first question. Any tips on encouraging my 11-year-old son to read and enjoy it?
Do you want me to go first, Rob?
After you, mate, go on.
Yeah. What I would say, some people never, ever enjoy reading. I do. I find reading incredibly difficult. As a child, my favourite author, who is almost banned now, was Enid Blyton. Possibly a lot of people even now won't even remember Enid Blyton. It was The Famous Five. I was 14 years old when I discovered that Timmy was a dog. I thought it was 5 children. On occasions, when I read the story, and this is how the dyslexic mind is more creative than other minds, this character, Timmy, who I decided was a little boy, didn't seem to be doing something a little boy should do. I just made it work. I made it fit. Any words I couldn't read, I skipped. That was my experience. I enjoyed it. So if you're 11-year-old, find something. If it's cooking, if it's growing something in the garden. When I worked in very rural communities, doing some key skills, maths and English, if I asked those farming children to write a story about Shakespeare, I may as well have cooked a goose or a swan or something for dinner. Because if I talked about crops and how much fertilizer you needed to dilute down and how much seed that you would need for a particular field, we engaged them. I'm not saying this is the case with your 11-year-old boy, but it is anything, riding bikes, computer games, cooking. Use that for the reading first. If you're going to cook something, let's look at the menu. Let's look at the ingredients. Let's read those. If he likes mending things or riding his bike, start it just around something he's going to be really, really interested in and try and build it up. But accept that there are people who can read perfectly well who choose not to read. I hope that answers the question.
Rob, I'm not sure if you want to add anything or can.
Yeah, very briefly, make it fun. Read to them, and let them see you reading and let them see the pleasure you get out of it. But read to them, be a role model for them, show them if you can, but make it fun and let them choose the kind of things they want to read. They're going to be pushed to read a lot of stuff at school, of course, but let them try and give them options. Take them to the library, give them options.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just briefly, sorry, Claudia. I go into a high school. I haven't because of COVID for the last year, but I do reading recovery in a local high school. It's a very difficult school. I spend more time reading to the children than they should technically be trying to read to me, but they follow the words with their finger, and that's the starting point. Thank you, Claudia.
Thanks, Clive. Now I've got a question and a comment. So this is from Dominic. Firstly, the question is, why are assessments still not adapted to neurodiverse young people? And the comment is, and since they are not adapted, why is it called inclusive education? It's doing my head in. 30 years after I struggle through the system, we are still putting our kids through the same thing. It's really difficult to understand.
Rob?
Yeah. I mean, don't get me on the soapbox, but yeah, absolutely. There needs to be more political will, pressure from people inside the education system. The illustration Clive showed earlier about all the animals having to do the same test is a perfect example of why the system is wrong and in so many ways, and how it's stacked against neurodiverse people. And it will take time. It's not going to happen overnight, but there needs to be a groundswell of opposition to this idea that everyone has to climb the same tree to show what they can do. Yeah, I could go on an awful lot longer, but yeah, political will.
I'll just add to that very briefly, because it's a hidden disability. Quite a few years ago, and you may remember it, wheelchair users and others were chaining themselves to London buses. They were painting the gates at number 10 Downing Street. And it was a massive revolt over certain things to get those equal access, as simple things as a ramp going up a curb. They took it to a higher level, because if you just potter along the bottom, people, you say to me, well, they're not going to lose the bus passport. We know that, but you don't get anywhere by just scraping at the bottom. And we've not got that with dyslexia because it's a hidden disability, I'm afraid. And yeah, thank you, Rob. I absolutely agree with what you said.
Thank you. Another one from Catherine was a really useful presentation, lots of experiences we can identify with. What is the Dragon software you refer to?
Go on, Clive.
The best thing is if that person wants to contact me, I'll tell you briefly about it now. I can arrange on Zoom or whatever else, because I use that all the time. I could not cope without Dragon. It is a very powerful voice-operated system that can, from a person with massive difficulties and disabilities, can operate an entire computer by voice, down to I just use it for voice. I can put in 95% accuracy as a quite severe dyslexic, and I can produce a couple of 1,000-word documents in a similar time that a non-dyslexic would. The difficulty with Dragon is two things. One, it's not that cheap, and two, it needs a lot of training. And if you just bought it, and I think Rob can just jump in on this briefly at the end, if you just bought it and tried to use it yourself, I don't think it would go well, Rob. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. But again, Access to Work will fund it, and DSA will fund it, and we can certainly put you in touch with a trainer if that's something if that's a route you're looking at going down.
Great, thank you. Another question from Ruth. How can school get a dyslexic diagnosis when there's no funding from anywhere? How does it work?
Depending where you live, I can only speak for Cheshire, North Wales and the Wirral. The simple answer is you can't. There's no funding, end of story. I have parents ring me up almost weekly who leave in tears. They will go around with no shoes on to try and get the children assessed, and it is not there. It is a massive problem. It is wrong. Rob mentioned his soapbox a minute ago. This is where it's the wrong way around. There's lots of funding at university. It's not that it shouldn't be there. It should be across the board. I was tested within a week as a 30-year-old adult. I wanted to go back to university. I went to the job centre. I was tested free of charge within a week. My son, who is now 33, who is severely dyslexic, he had to go through a process at school, but he was tested in 3 months. Now he's 33, so you can show how long ago it was, and that was funded by the council. What the government did, and this is important for people to understand, they said the schools have got this money now. So the schools, if they think it's appropriate, must spend it on an assessment. They haven't got the money, they've had repeated cuts, and they've got other things to spend it on. So I have no answer apart from there are seek funding, look for the other funding opportunities, crowd anything, but sadly, no, the school do not have to pay, and most would love to pay because it would help them. The school would love the child to have an assessment so they could work with the child. The school's judged on its results, so they can't ask for any adaptations or reasonable adjustments without an assessment, and they can't afford one either. I'm so sorry. That's the best I can say.
Great, thank you. We got a question from Rachel, and this is for Rob. If there was one thing you'd have liked your teachers to know about you, what would it be? What could they have done to have helped you?
Advocate. You need people to advocate for you, and sometimes for parents as well. The hardest part of this is the fact that you're going to be turned away at a lot of places where you feel you need to go to for support. People are going to say, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. You've got to, in the short term, until medium term, until they sort this funding issue out, to get assessments done for children so they can get the adjustments put in place in the classroom. You are going to have to work so hard, and you're going to get frustrated. And to sort of kind of answer Rachel's question, it is just, you need people to listen. I would want people to listen to me and to find a way of making it happen, find a way of making support happen.
Perfect. And a little bit later on, Rachel said, can we ask Clive too? The same question.
Right. Well, I was asked to leave school, wasn't I? For me, it was incredible. For my son owned his dyslexia. He wore it on his sleeve. He didn't ask for any special favours, but the caretaker knew why he needed letting in the gym because he'd left his school bag there at break time. The caretaker knew on a Saturday morning when he was cutting the grass that Aaron would rock up because he'd left his coat or he'd left something he needed for the weekend. The dinner ladies understood. So to me, if it's just, as Rob said, the communication, if you can manage to own it, if you can manage just to make it part of you and embrace it, but it's hard. It's easier said than done. It really, really is.
Can I just add to that, Nikki? Claudia, Nikki, one of my clients that I mentioned earlier, the gentleman who didn't like to self-disclose, he was now an ambassador. When he was at school, he was kicked out of classes. You know, he was a troublemaker and self-harmed. You know, so he couldn't write to avoid writing. Went through all this. He's the most keen guy in an organisation of 5,000 people now who wants to learn and wants to do everything. And if they just knew back then what he needed to help him, he wouldn't have spent the last 25 years waiting for someone, waiting to play catch up, and he loves learning. And at the time, they didn't understand what he was trying to say to them.
All dyslexics love learning. They just get it beaten out of them.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We've gone over our time, so we're not going to have time for any more questions, but anyone that would like to ask any more questions, please email Rob or Clive. I am sure they will come back to you. I'd like to, take this time to say thank you for everyone, especially during this heat and this heat wave, for sitting in front of a screen for the last hour. Thank you so much for joining us. So just a reminder for everyone to keep an eye on our website and social media so we can continue to help and provide support wherever we can. It just leaves me to say thank you again to Clive and Rob, and to everyone for joining us tonight. Stay safe and take care.